back down and shut your trap. It's time for
Keeping It Sports with M3.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Well, I'll need some beer.
Are you ready?
You have to ask me nicely.
Come on now, don't be bashful.
Are you ready? Are you ready for
The place for the best sports talk and news surrounding each league.
I can prove it with my usual flawless logic.
Hey, man, this time we're going to do it my way.
What's your name again?
And now, here's your host, M3, Mike Rosansky. Coming to you from Freehold, New Jersey. It's time for Keeping It Sports with M3, normally powered by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. Good evening, everyone. Hope everything's going well for you here on this Monday, the 17th day of February. I am, of course, Mike M3 Rosansky, your host for this podcast. Hope you're all having a great President's Day, whether you had off or you were that rare person that had to work today, coming off of what was hopefully a very fun, exciting weekend for all of you out there. A weekend that we can look at as a missed opportunity. A weekend that we can look at and say, damn, they really crapped the bed. And that they I'm talking about is, of course, the NBA. The NBA in recent years, and maybe it's just beyond this 4 or 5 year window that I'm looking at. The NBA in recent years has taken steps back in their war, I guess you can say, or their gravitational pull when it comes to fans against the NFL. The NFL has gone about its business in trying to take every single day away from the NBA. The NBA doesn't even try to create a schedule for Thanksgiving because they know that's home court for the NFL. And after years of Christmas being all about the NBA, the last couple of years, the NFL has looked at them and said, not so fast. This is our holiday now by scheduling these double and triple headers on days that aren't even prototypically NFL days. Like this past year, we had multiple games on a Wednesday, and you very rarely, unless there's a pandemic, see NFL games on a Wednesday. So this was the time for the NBA to strike. Your first non-NFL weekend. Your first weekend from now until Labor Day where no one is going to have to worry about their spotlight, their moment to shine being taken away by the NFL. A time where the NBA could stand out, could impress, could show off, could flex their muscles. Instead, they decide to walk into their bathrooms, per se, and take one big old dump. Because that's how I feel about this NBA All-Star Weekend. A weekend that, I'll be honest, I didn't watch any of it. I didn't watch All-Star Saturday Night. I didn't watch the crap that they put out there last night for the All-Star game because they have shown in recent years they don't care. Then why the hell should I? All the respect in the world to this kid, Mac McClung. The fact that he goes out there as a G League player and has won the slam dunk contest 3 years in a row. He goes out there and shows that this is something that he clearly works at. This is something he clearly trains at. It's also an example of why he's not an NBA player. You realize that he's won almost as many slam dunk contests now, with this being his third in a row, as he's had games up in the NBA, 5 to his name. And it's not like he's beating superstar talent. It's not like he's even beating all-star level talent. He's beating rookies. He's beating guys that are backups on the Bulls and the Bucks. You look around, you see these guys, and you're like, these guys are in the NBA. These guys are participants in the NBA. I know people for years have ripped MLB's home run derby, feel like it's kind of a nonsensical event. It's kind of just batting practice. But there, you at least see the star players participate in that. You at least see these guys try to give an effort, try to get involved in it. Look at the history of the NBA slam dunk contest. Michael Jordan participated in it. The late, great Kobe Bryant was in it. Vince Carter, Dominique Wilkins, Dr. J, Julius Erving, all of these legends, these all-time greats of the sport were involved in the slam dunk contest and won the slam dunk contest. Now it's matriculating down to the other events of All-Star Weekend. Whether it's the skills challenge, where you're seeing these pairs out there of guys that are either borderline all-stars or in the twilight of their career, like the likes of Draymond Green and Chris Paul. Please, Chris Paul, that's another smudge on his resume. The fact that him and Wembayama tried to go out there and create that nonsense and just F around with the skills competition. The only real all-stars that you had in this were Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley. And who knows if a guy like Mobley is going to be motivated to do this in the future when he starts really cracking into the big money, the big bucks. Between those two events, the three-point shooting contest, which to me has got to be the most tone-deaf moment of the entire weekend. When you see Tyler Hero, very good player, solid NBA player. He goes out there and wins this contest. Beats the likes of Buddy Hield and Darius Garland in the finals. But the only real star that he had to go up against were Jalen Brunson and Damian Lillard. And I remind you all again, where this event was taking place, where was All-Star festivities? In the Golden State Warriors' brand new arena. But did you see Steph Curry anywhere involved in this? Did you see him even try to give a damn, even try to show effort to get involved in this? No. And it's not even like he had an injury, because he went and played in that All-Star Game tournament the next night and won the MVP. You're the face of the Warriors franchise. You're one of the many great faces of the NBA. You're a legend in this sport. You're going to go down as arguably a top 10 player in the history of this league when your career is all said and done. And you can't go out there for the hometown crowd and participate in an event that you've kind of raised the game. You've raised the level of expectations for. And like I said, I didn't watch any of this. I watched a WWE event, and then I moved on about 5 to 10 minutes into the USA versus Canada game in the Four Nations tournament that the NHL is pulling off right now. And last night, when it comes to the All-Star Game tournament, never flipped it on even once. Not the normal broadcast, not the alternate broadcast with Draymond Green and company. No, I watched the 50th anniversary of Saturday Night Live because, as I said earlier, the players don't care about it. Why should I care about it? Why should I give a damn about it when you don't have Steph Curry participating in the three-point shootout? You don't have stars participating in the dunk contest. I put the blame of this at the feet of one of the greatest of all time, a guy that's going to go down as, depending on who you are, either the first or second best player in the history of the NBA. That, of course, being LeBron James. LeBron James, years ago, had the opportunity to enter the dunk contest. Remember, he came close in 2010. Remember that one year where you had Nate Robinson and Dwight Howard doing all of that crazy stuff. He was so jacked up. He was so excited about it. And he said, oh, next year in Dallas, I'm going to throw my name in the mix and be in the dunk contest. And about a month out from it, he pulled his name out from the preliminary list of people. Once he did that, you started to see a slow but steady slippage in big-time players being involved in it. We still got some good dunk contests along the way, like Zach LaVine versus Aaron Gordon, and of course the craziness that Nate Robinson and Dwight Howard were doing in different dunk contests along the way. But you haven't seen the premier stars. You haven't seen the guys that are the faces of the sport. You haven't seen LeBron do it. You haven't seen Kevin Durant do it. You never saw Giannis Antetokounmpo, as of right now, do the slam dunk contest. I know him, Ja Morant, and Zach LaVine were posting on social media on Saturday night some potential interest in doing it next year, but I got to see it to believe it that they're actually going to get involved in it. And then you go to last night's All-Star Game tournament. 2 hours before tip-off, LeBron James pulls out of it because of lingering issues he's dealing with his left foot and ankle. And listen, the guy's in his 22nd year in the league. He has the right to do what he wants at this point. But let's not act like he just showed up to the building at 4:30 and said, nah, I can't do it tonight. No, he's known for a while that he couldn't participate in this. The weekend prior, he couldn't play in a game against the Indiana Pacers. He sat out with this same thing. He was able to come back for Luka's debut last week, but now he's going to pull out 2 hours beforehand. He knew in enough time that he could have put the message out there to Adam Silver to have a backup participant available. You had Norman Powell there and ready on Saturday night. He was one of those guys that just missed the cutoff as far as making the All-Star reserves. He could have been your replacement. Or he could have been the replacement for Anthony Edwards, who wasn't able to play in this. And to show that there's a disconnect here, NBA All-Star Weekend has always been almost like this homecoming event for the players, for the legends of this sport. And I guarantee that what these players today are doing has gone up to these legends and been one big slap in the face toward them, one big sign of disrespect thrown their way. And you know how I know that? This weekend was the first time in a while that Earvin Magic Johnson did not come to NBA All-Star Weekend. You used to fall all over yourself each direction, seeing another legend here, another legend there. I know some of them have started to pass away, unfortunately, due to age or some form of medical condition. But you still had so many of the all-time greats, all of the living ones that were within good standing of the NBA were coming out for this weekend. But now Magic Johnson's not coming out. And I don't think that was just coincidental. I think he, in his heart, knows that these players don't care. So why should I care? Why should I show up when they're not showing up? And where the lack of care has come from, it's very easy. Adam Silver wants to sit there and point to saying the league is in a great state, that we're getting so much attention. We're still filling up all of these arenas, that we're generating, what do you say, $75 billion? That's what it's all about for these players now. It's the money. It's their brands. They care more about their brand and more about their celebrity than they do good, hard, honest competition. Because you don't have any of the rivalries that we had in the past. And I'm not just talking about before I was born, when the Celtics and Pistons would get into fights, or the Celtics and the Lakers would get into fights in the 70s, 80s. I'm talking as far back as like 20 years ago, when you would see maybe not things as heinous as the Malice at the Palace with Ben Wallace and Ron Artest, but you would see guys going all out, showing an utter, complete hatred for the opposition on the other team. Hell, Kobe Bryant, when he played in the All-Star game, played it like it was his last game. He played it like it was a regular season game, even though he would only be out there for 20 to 25 minutes. But you don't see that from these players. The All-Star game had turned into just a layup line drill, a slam dunk contest in a game, guys jacking up a crap load of threes from behind half court. It's kind of symbolic of what the NBA regular season has become, where you see a lack of effort on defense, especially from star players. And I'm not saying that things have to be like the bad boy Pistons, where they're sending guys into the third row in the crowd. But effort is what I'm asking for, not just waiting for the postseason to play a little bit of defense in the last 5 minutes of a game, or the amount of threes that we're seeing get jacked up during a game. You realize that the Boston Celtics lead the league with 48.3 three-point attempts per game this season. Go back 10 years ago. The Rockets led with just over 32 three-point attempts per game. You go back to 2009, 2010. The Orlando Magic led the league with 27 three-point attempts per game. And go back to 04, 05. The Phoenix Suns, which were thought of as just an up and down the court kind of team, non-stop offense, didn't give a damn about defense, coached by Mike D'Antoni. They were only taking 24 three-point attempts per game. So as great as Steph Curry is, as great as Klay Thompson is, as much as I love and respect those guys, they've had a negative impact on the sport. Not just All-Star Weekend, but the regular season games, in fact. All the way around, these players, quite frankly, should be embarrassed by what they've turned All-Star Weekend into. Not having a sense of pride, not having a sense of urgency, want to show competition. They're too afraid of their brands. They're too afraid of potentially losing one of these competitions, having it be harmful to their bottom line. We're back in the day. We remember the infamous line from Larry Bird. He walked into All-Star Weekend at one point and looked at everyone in the locker room saying, "Who's finishing second tonight in the three-point shooting contest?" And he went out there and kicked all of their asses. These players, quite frankly, as great, as talented as they are, as athletically gifted as they are, at times, they're the sport's own worst enemy. They don't care about the health of the game. They just care about their own bottom line. They just care about protecting their own brand. And it's become an embarrassment for this weekend. It's become an embarrassment for this sport. And I don't blame it if legends like Magic Johnson are annoyed, or if today the GOAT, Michael Jordan, is sitting there while celebrating his 62nd birthday, annoyed, shaking his head at what a disgrace these guys are. Yeah, they're making generational money, but they don't care about the future generations of this sport. They only care about their brand and what is going to protect it and what's going to keep it bulletproof at all costs. And I've got some more thoughts on the health of the NBA coming up, because there's really a lot more glaring problems beyond All-Star Weekend that I want to continue to dissect. I want to keep talking about here after a quick break. I'll also give you some thoughts on the NFL as we're about to hit free agency in a little less than 2 weeks' time. Mix in some baseball, as well as there's some concerning things as spring training gets underway here. So plenty left for me to get to over the next about 45 minutes or so here. Glad you guys could join me on this Monday evening. And as I tell you, each and every single week, please sit back, relax, hell, put your feet up if you feel like it, and continue keeping it sports with M3.
I'll be back.
While he wasn't part of the actual All-Star game, Draymond Green was still at All-Star weekend, being that it was in the Bay Area at the Golden State Warriors home building. He had some comments on TNT about the current state of the NBA, talking about the week prior when they played the Los Angeles Lakers, how refreshing it was to go against LeBron James, how he's notorious in finding weaknesses and exploiting them. Every possession against him was a chess move, and you don't get much of that in today's NBA. Saying, quote, you don't get that on a regular basis. It's just who can run faster, who can hit more threes. It's no substance. It's very boring. And what I'll say to that is, while he's right, Draymond, you guys did that to yourselves. You guys have turned this sport into that. I was saying moments ago that as much as I respect and love Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, everyone saw what they were doing and how they're hitting these three-point shots with ease from essentially the parking lot at times. Remember, it used to be back in the 90s, there was that slogan, be like Mike. Well, now people are looking at it and saying, oh, they don't want to be like LeBron because he's a freak of nature physically, and that is generically not possible for most people. But they look at Steph Curry, they see him as this slender guy, this guy that's handsome, guy that is more relatable to the younger generation, and it's become a let's be like Steph thing. So it's trickulating all the way down to the college level, the high school level, but at those levels, they're still playing defense. They're still giving somewhat of an effort. Hell, you saw more effort in the St. John's Creighton game defensively yesterday than you saw in the All-Star game, than you've seen in almost every NBA game over the course of this season, especially games that are nationally televised. Why it's become like this? It's because of the almighty dollar. It's because these players are so fearful of getting injured, even though they're under guaranteed contracts, unlike the NFL players. They're getting this generational money handed to them. I mean, you look at it, a guy like Al Horford, even though he plays his ass off every night and has been seemingly a workhorse over the course of his, 16, 17-year career now, you realize that that guy's made close to $280 million over the course of his career. After taxes, he's gotten probably at least 190 of that. You weren't seeing guys on that level. In the comparison of Al Horford, probably the fair comparison is comparing him to a guy like Rick Fox, those big men role player kind of guys. They weren't making that big time money back then. So they were all heart and hustle because their NBA futures relied on them being that heart and hustle. They made up for what they maybe lacked talently with all heart and hustle. You don't see that from a lot of guys. Hell, Patrick Beverley, he's not in the league right now. We'll see if he comes back in the next year or so. Even though I couldn't stand him and I thought he was a dirty player with some of the things he was doing with Russell Westbrook, he was going out there and fighting his ass off, battling his ass off every single night because he knew this is what I got to do to stick in the NBA. You had that kind of actual rivalry taking place. Nowadays, it's everybody's each other's best friend. And it's matriculated to what you see on All-Star Weekend now, where they just are nonchalant on defense. They allow each other to have free open dunks. They don't contest each other on three-point shots. We were getting to the point where you were close to having a team score 200 points in the All-Star game. Hell, we're probably getting close to that becoming a reality in an regular season game with how often you're turning around each night and you're seeing somebody put up 145 points with a little effort defensively. A guy like Draymond Green putting that out there, we know how tenacious he can be defensively. We also know how dirty he can be defensively at times. That's why Adam Silver had been so combative about Draymond Green's comments. But Adam Silver is also part of the problem here. Adam Silver, while he's done things to try to prevent the maintenance days that were created way back when with Greg Popovich and the Spurs sitting Duncan Parker and Ginobili, sending them home on a night of a primetime game on TNT. He's done things to try to space out the All-Star week where the stars are essentially getting one full week off, going from either Wednesday or Thursday all the way to the following Thursday of playing a regular season game. But he's also part of the problem here because he's essentially these players' best friends. He lets them get away with whatever they want. He lets them run the league. He's let it become more about a me sport than a team sport because everybody's got a brand. Everybody's got a podcast. Everybody is essentially a celebrity. And then the fact that they continue to add teams to the playoffs. I mean, this play-in thing, it's a joke. This play-in tournament is absolute garbage with the fact that you have 10 teams on each side making it to the playoffs. And we know the 10th team, they essentially have no shot in hell. Even if you win those 2 games and advance to the playoffs, they're a dead man walking to the 1 seed that in all likelihood, unless they're injured, is going to go out there and steamroll them in 4 or 5 games. And then when you take into account the All-Star game itself in what it turned into, and the fact that now you got Draymond complaining about the format of this weekend with them having to add a Rising Stars team as the 4th team in order to have a tournament. You guys did that to yourselves. If you would have played a little bit of effort, and I'm not saying these stars, I'm not saying LeBron, KD, Steph, they got to go out there and play 35 to 42 minutes like they would in a regular season game. But on one Sunday night where the entire world has a chance to be watching you, can you go out there and play hard for 18 to 20 minutes? That's all we're asking for. That's all we want. We want to actually care about seeing all of the best in the world on one court at the same time. You should not be having a situation where you're losing a battle on a Saturday night that should be one of the highlights of your regular season to the NHL playing their Four Nations competition. And I don't know if that's going to be something that stands the test of time and stands with longevity, is something that we do over the long course of an NHL season consistently. But at least they're trying something. At least those players are going out there and showing intensity, showing heart, showing a care for playing for not just the name on the back of their jersey, but the name on the front of it, competing for their country, whether it be in this tournament or when they play in the Olympic Games. There's probably no correct time in the year to really play it, but the NHL is doing something that has provided some excitement during what can be a bore at times of an 82-game season. You watch US versus Canada on Saturday night. There are 3 fights in the first 90 seconds. Maybe some of that is Team USA pissed off at the Canadian fans for booing our national anthem. But they go out there and show a fight, show an intensity like it's a postseason game. You don't see that in the NBA regular season. You don't see that in the NBA All-Star game. But I'll tell you what, over the course of these last, 27, 28 games that we have in the regular season, you're going to see some heart. You're going to see some teams have to scrap. Some teams have to fight. I mean, look at the Dallas Mavericks. They're a mass unit right now with how many big men that they have lost to injury. In the last week, they've lost Daniel Gafford for 6 weeks due to an MCL sprain. They've lost Anthony Davis after one game, his debut with the Dallas Mavericks. He goes down with an abductor strain. They were without Derek Lively already. Who knows if he's going to be back ready for the postseason. And Dwight Powell, who had been their backup center, he's been out the last 14 games with a strained hip. And that's put them in a damning spot where they're only at 30-26, 8th in the West, only 3 games ahead of the Phoenix Suns, who are 11th in the West. These players, they better start caring. They better start showing a sense of urgency. Start not just with the regular season, but with what is one of your most important weekends of your calendar. It's not just about you. It's about us. It's about the fans. It's about the ones that pay your salary by flipping on the TV on Wednesday, Friday, and Monday nights for big games. Saturday nights on ABC. It's about us that go through the turnstiles to watch these big games. Hell, even watch you when you're playing lackluster, low-level competition and still cheer our asses off. Still sit there and give up 2.5 hours of our time to watch what we hope is a competitive effort. But you don't get that every night. You don't get every night of these players showing that each game matters. All of it is about this generation caring about their brand, this generation only caring about the postseason. Your brand is made in the postseason. Your brand is made by getting to the playoffs, going on deep runs, and winning championships. As great and talented as he is, LeBron James wouldn't be as big a name as he is without 4 NBA titles. Same with Steph Curry. Same with Durant and the 2 championships that he's won. We almost look down on the likes of a guy like Charles Barkley or John Stockton or Karl Malone because they don't have championships, despite how great they were in the regular season. And they treated the regular season like every game was their last. Something's got to change here, whether it's salaries coming down for these players, which I don't think that will ever happen. They're not going to lessen the length of the regular season because then that means less money for them, or whether that means getting rid of this commissioner and bringing in somebody that is more of the lines of his predecessor, that while he was a fair man in David Stern, also was not kissing the players' ass every single moment, was not buddy-buddy with them, and actually held them accountable, actually held their feet to the fire, and cared more about the brand than any one given individual.
I'll be back.
Other than the fact that there are no games going on Sundays, Monday nights, or Thursday nights, there is one big negative about the NFL season finally coming to an end. And that is that, unfortunately, we got to talk about the Dallas Cowboys once again. Yeah, I know. You're all as annoyed by that as I am. The most sickening fan base, most obnoxious owner in probably all of professional sports, if we're going to be honest there. I know some could throw the Yankees in there. Some could throw fans of the Lakers or Celtics in there, but at least those teams win. At least those teams have gotten to the finals in their respective sports. The Dallas Cowboys make more off-the-field headlines than they actually win games. For whatever the reason may be, whether it be because of television ratings, money they make off the field for some reason, these clowns are still considered America's team. With the playoffs finally being over, now they've decided to be mouthy. Now they've decided to make their voices heard, with one of the faces of their franchise, Dak Prescott, speaking last week after the Eagles won the Super Bowl at a fundraiser gala he was at, when he said, quote, "I feel like we've competed with the Eagles and we beat them for the most part when we've played them." That's not true. They blew you out both times you guys played this year. I don't want to say check the record when the other guy is holding the trophy, right? So credit to them. They've earned it. They deserve it by all means. But yeah, we're very close. He would go on to talk about the Commanders as well, say, I feel confident we've gotten better each and every time. Just seeing such a dominant fashion in the Super Bowl, credit them. It's our turn. It's on us. What the hell do you mean it's our turn? I mean, yeah, it's on you to go out there and play your ass off and show effort, be competitive, and try to win games. But I'm sorry, last I checked, the Dallas Cowboys are coming off of a 7-10 season in which they started off embarrassingly awful. Remember, dating back to last year's playoff game against the Packers, they had gotten blown out by at least 20 points in something like 6 or 7 consecutive home games. It wasn't even a competitive NFL product. And to me, the NFL is the sport you gotta show the most effort in. It's the one that, even though we start off the year with the first month and a half looking like crap because of no one playing in the preseason, it's the one that I feel still in the regular season resembles a playoff level effort, followed by MLB and NHL, and then the crap that you get with the NBA. But Dak Prescott and the Cowboys, they're delusional if they think that they're close. This is the Kool-Aid that they have been fed to them by the most oblivious, most delusional, most arrogant owner / team president / general manager in all of professional sports, Jerry Jones. You realize, ladies and gentlemen, that the Dallas Cowboys, not only have they not played in the Super Bowl since last winning it in the 1995-1996 season, they have not, in that time frame, even been to the conference championship game. And in that time, all 15 other teams in the NFC have made it to at least the NFC championship game. And that includes some franchises that are expansion franchises like the Carolina Panthers. For Dak to go off and run off his mouth, listen, I understand being confident. You want to be confident in sports, exude confidence, and give something for your fans to be hype about. But in 10 seasons playing quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, Dak Prescott has made the playoffs 5 times, has a record of 2-5 in those appearances, and has not made it to a conference title game. So how about, before talking about you're close to getting to a Super Bowl, how about at least you make it to Championship Sunday first before you run your mouth? And this is a guy that in 10 years, he's now going to be going on his 3rd different head coach. What kind of quarterback survives that kind of lifespan with one team and having that many coaches? A quarterback that is pampered, even though he's a good guy, pampered by the most delusional, foolish owner in all of professional sports. And he's been brainwashed and fed this Kool-Aid by Jerry Jones now for 10 going on 11 seasons. And it doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. There could be a change coming in Kansas City, as we're going to find out relatively soon the future of Travis Kelce. And Travis Kelce, while, yeah, I've been critical of some of the off-the-field stuff, I think that gets brought to our attention too much. We shouldn't even care who he dates. That's his business. There shouldn't be so much focus on that. Whether he dates Taylor Swift or he dates someone that works alongside me at Amazon, that shouldn't matter to anyone. That's his business, not ours. What should be the concern is when he's playing on Sunday, what kind of production he puts up and how he's helping the Chiefs try to get to victory. Despite how much of a clown he can be at times, despite how much there's so much unnecessary attention on his personal life, there's no doubting this is one of the greatest tight ends that we've ever seen play in the NFL. He's going to be a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. But are we reaching that time of it being done is the question, because we saw a drop in his production this year when it came to receiving yards and touchdowns. He still, because of the injuries that they dealt with in the wide receiver core, led the team in receptions with 97. But you could clearly see a Travis Kelce that was slowing down. I don't think it was just because he decided to run out there with the Uncle Rico haircut. He's been playing this game a lot longer than most of the great tight ends that have played in this sport. He's played 13 seasons. Next year, if he plays, will be his 14th season. Yeah, he's made a crap load of money. He's made himself an incredible legacy. It's a legacy that's going to lead to him making more money off the field when his playing days are done after he's put in the Hall of Fame. But the Chiefs are seemingly putting a deadline on him making the decision of mid-March, because it's not just on the fifth day of training camp. He's got non-guarantees, roster bonuses coming his way, and workout bonuses. He's got a non-guarantee roster bonus due on March 14th, with the first day of the new league year being March 12th. They'd like to get things rolling. They'd like to know, are they going to have that extra $11.5 million to spend on free agency and potentially go out there and get a new tight end to replace him, unless they think Noah Gray is that guy to take the ball and be their starting tight end? Or if they're going to have one of the pillars of the history of their franchise back for next year. And I wouldn't blame him if he walked away. If they had won last, the decision probably would have been easy. Hey, if he won 3 consecutive championships, won his 4th title, he could walk off into the sunset, do whatever the hell he wants with Taylor Swift for all I care, and call it a day. But there's a competitor in there. There's a guy that, behind all the craziness, strives for greatness. There's a guy that looks at this and says, do I really want to go out on these terms? That also requires a level of dedication. That requires him going in 100% and putting his body through a hell that, as of right now, he's not even sure if he wants to do that. Even at 35 years old, he's taken a beating. He's taken a taxing, despite how large a human being we're talking about here. It's rough for these guys. That's why you don't see many guys outside of the quarterback position play until they're 40, 41 years old. You see guys retiring earlier than what is considered the prime years of athletes in other sports. And remember, because of how deep they've gone into the postseason, 7 consecutive years of going to at least the AFC Championship game. The last 7 years, he's played 3 or 4 more games each year than most other players. He's played close to 20 games in the last 7 seasons each year. He may feel it's time. Hell, when you hear an athlete talking about they're not sure and hinting at retirement, that's usually the way that they're leaning. And if he does, mad respect for the career he's put up, and a career that in all likelihood will put him in the Hall of Fame. Now, as we enter free agency, there's going to be 2 Hall of Fame careers that we're closely watching after, that we're closely wondering where things go from here, what direction they head in. Those are the careers of Aaron Rodgers and Matthew Stafford. I'm not surprised that the Jets are moving on from Aaron Rodgers. In my mind, I thought the best route for them, if they want to be competitive next year, is sticking with Aaron Rodgers and having him be their quarterback going into next season. But I am in no way surprised that this is the route that they have chosen to go, that this is the route that they have ultimately decided on, because we have a new general manager. We have a new head coach. It's not the same regime as he came in on. It's not the same head coach and general manager that flew to his house in California 2 years ago on their hands and knees, begging and pleading, saying, oh, we'll do anything if you come try to save our franchise. It was the right move to make at the time. I will never never until the day I die look at that move and say it was the incorrect move. Where the Jets were as a franchise, the fact that they had a team that looked like it was ready to compete, they just were lacking of any competentness at the quarterback position, even with him having a down year in his last year in Green Bay. It was worth trying, and it was a move that, even despite the results that we've seen here, if you flash back 2 years and rewind, I would have done it over and over again, because at least you tried something here. But now they're clearly moving on, whether it was the off-the-field controversies and, Aaron not being amendable to them, viewing him as one of 53 and wanting him to be at all the mandatory and voluntary training camps during the offseason, not going to be allowing him any excused absences for voluntary OTAs in June, whether it be the Pat McAfee show, who knows if there's any truth to that. As they say, there's always 3 sides to every story. His side, and then somewhere in the middle is the truth on what happened here. What I will say is, while I'm not one of these fans that is heartbroken and saying this is the worst move ever moving on from Aaron Rodgers, I can understand wanting to clear out the mess, clear out the headaches here, and wanting to be protective of a young star in Garrett Wilson, who probably would have tried to force his way out if you kept Aaron Rodgers and all his best friends here going into next year. I need to know there's a definitive plan. You can't be going into this just saying, oh, we're cutting Aaron Rodgers, but we don't know what the hell we're doing at quarterback. Whether it's you're going to have Tyrod Taylor there and you sign someone along the lines of Jameis Winston, or you are truly in the mix of potentially signing Justin Fields, and he's your bridge quarterback until you find your long-term solution. There needs to be a plan, because fans will deal with losing or down seasons if they know there's a plan, if there's some pathway to better days. Take, for example, 7 years ago, when the New York Rangers started selling off veteran players that had been part of their core for 8 to 9 years. They had gotten so close to the Stanley Cup Finals, but realized that it was time to move on from that group. Remember the infamous letter that the Rangers put out to their fan base, talking about how much they appreciated the passion of their fan base, but they were going to be starting to build with younger players at that trade deadline. Ranger fans, although they were disappointed about the position that the team was in, respected the fact that there was a plan. You give Jet fans a plan here, or show them signs of a plan here, they'll be like, all right, we're not happy that in all likelihood next year we're going to be a meh team, middle of the pack team, probably not have a chance at making the playoffs now for 15 consecutive years. But at least there's a plan. At least we can see there's a sense of direction. While with past Jet regimes, there was no direction. There didn't seem to be a plan. And hopefully Glenn and Mooney have their ducks in a row. Now there needs to be a big plan when it comes to the Giants, and you're starting to see rumblings all over the place. Maybe they could be a potential destination for Matthew Stafford. If that is something that comes to fruition, if that is something that becomes an available option for them, potentially trading for Matthew Stafford, as they're going to have $43 million in cap space, not going to have much cap holdover from cap space this past season, and with, before cuts, some available roster spot openings, that's definitely a route they should look into. I don't think you would have to trade the 3rd overall pick. In fact, if I were a Giant fan, I'd throw something at my TV if all of a sudden I tune on the NFL Network or ESPN one of these days and saw the likes of Ian Rappaport or Adam Schefter reporting that the Giants traded the 3rd overall pick to go get Matthew Stafford. I think it would be more likely along the lines of trading a second and maybe a draft pick for next year, especially if you're able to pile together trading for Stafford and bringing on Cooper Kupp, because that's where you could really make things interesting. You bring in his favorite target from the last several years in Los Angeles. You put Kupp now as your number 2 wide receiver to Malik Neighbors. With him there, with this running back Tracy, you have a semblance of an offense being put together. And let's face it, Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, they need to start winning games. And the best way to start winning games is not using that 3rd overall pick to draft Shedeur Sanders or draft Cam Ward if they're fortunate for one of those two to fall for them. No, it's trading for a quarterback along the lines of a Matthew Stafford. If they get lucky somewhere along the draft and are able to draft his eventual successor in a couple of years, fine. But with the losing that Daboll and the Giants have done the last couple of years, Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen's careers with the Giants could be on the line this off season. What they do, the moves they make, are going to shape how we view their legacy and how we view them moving forward, whether they're going to do the most important thing next year, and that's win games, get back to being a winning team, and potentially challenge for the postseason in what is suddenly becoming an even more difficult NFC East.
I'll be back.
Well, what do you know? After several seasons of seemingly performing in the offseason like they were a small market franchise, the Boston Red Sox have finally started to act like a big market club that they are and should be treated like once again. Earlier in the offseason, they went out and traded for Garrett Crochet from the White Sox. They signed veteran pitchers in Walker Buehler and Aroldis Chapman to 1-year contracts to help fill out their rotation and bullpen, especially in the case of Chapman, filling the closer role with Kenley Jansen, leaving for the Angels. But they needed to add to that offense. It looked like Rafael Devers and a bunch of kids out there. And you didn't have a lot of power. You didn't have a lot of protection for him in that lineup until late last Wednesday when they decided to surprise everyone and be the team that finally signed Alex Bregman. Gave Bregman a lot more money than I expected him to get this offseason. A 3-year deal for $120 million that has opt-outs after each of the first 2 years, will allow him to become a free agent if he has a big season. He got his money. He's a guy that is in his 30s now, but last year still put together a quality season for the Houston Astros, kind of a little bit down from what we saw from in his 20s. But if you're getting a guy that hits 26 home runs in 145 games, bats .260, plays really good defense, then that is worth $40 million a year. You'd like him to drive in more than 75 runs. He's put up historically really good numbers at Fenway Park. In fact, he has the highest OPS for a player who's played at least 90 plate appearances in 20 games at Fenway Park historically. The one big issue, if you're a Red Sox fan, that you should have with this, part of what's the problem in sports these days, and that is the babying of a player's ego. Because I saw this move, and I'm like, okay, it increases the difficulty against the Red Sox now. They're going to be better defensively at third base because you put a guy there in Alex Bregman that won his first Gold Glove last year, but has played at a Gold Glove level over the course of his career. You can move Devers either to first base or DH. But it doesn't sound like that is going to be what happens here. As of right now, they're planning on moving Alex Bregman. Get this. They're planning on having Alex Bregman play second base. Unless this big prospect of theirs, Christian Campbell, breaks camp and they got to reconfigure things and shift Devers to DH, which he doesn't want to do. They're planning on playing Bregman at second base because Rafael Devers, he's all up in his feelings. He cares more about it being his position than he does about what's best for the team. And yes, he's gotten his money. He's signed through the next 10 years at $300 million. But Rafael Devers is an awful defensive third baseman. Since he signed that deal, he has a negative 18 defensive runs saved, the worst amongst qualified third basemen in the sport. And last year, he was the worst in the sport at minus 9 defensive runs saved with a negative 2.5 WAR. Whereas Bregman was amongst the best with 6 defensive runs saved and an over 8 defensive WAR. But no, the Red Sox have to placate to his feelings, have to placate to his ego we don't want to hurt Rafael Devers' feeling. By doing a move like this, taking a Gold Glove third baseman and having him play second base, a position that he's not played much, if at all, in his professional career, this is almost on par with what the Chiefs did in the postseason by moving Joe Thuney from left guard to left tackle, where you could maybe get away with it for a game or so, but you're weakening yourselves at 2 defensive positions because we have to keep someone's ego high. We have to protect Rafael Devers' feelings, even though you're throwing $313 million at him for the next decade. Fine. As a Yankee fan, I will continue to be laughing every time Devers makes a defensive miscue. And who knows, hopefully this year Garrett Cole actually develops a set and decides to pitch to him instead of intentionally walking him. Gutless clown. I know spring training is a time for optimism, time for motivation, emotions to be high. The worst thing that you hear about in spring training is injuries. And listen, if an injury is going to happen, you'd prefer it happen in spring training rather than the regular season because at least there's time to recover. At least there's time to recuperate. But we just started spring training in the last week. Pitchers and catchers reported last Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on the team you root for. And position players have reported in the last 24 hours. But already, we're barely getting started, and you're already hearing about injuries with both the Mets and the Yankees. And take into account the Mets. The Mets didn't spend big money on their rotation this year once again. David Stearns decided to go the same route he went last year, spending below market money on guys that he hoped their pitching coach could elevate the game of. Whether it be spending $13 million a year on Clay Holmes to move from the bullpen to the starting rotation, or spending on Frankie Montas $17 million a year after he pitched to nearly a 5 ERA last year for the Reds and Brewers in 30 starts. But once again, the injury bug is cropping up on Frankie Montas as he's now being shut down for the next 6 weeks due to what they're calling a high-grade lat strain. You were already running into a problem here because the Mets were going to be one of those teams that was planning on going with a 6-man rotation this year due to Kodai Senga missing pretty much all of last year due to injury, wanting to get him more back to the schedule that he had in Japan where he could be potentially pitching once a week or once every 6 days. And you would adjust with days off here and there, especially if there was the opportunity to maybe a time through the rotation with a day off, use Clay Holmes out of the bullpen. But now you lose Montas. Now you're really digging into your depth, your veteran depth. That wasn't really great depth to begin with. You're potentially now filling 2 spots with number 5 type starters rather than just one spot, as now the likes of Paul Blackburn, Griffin Cannon, and Tyler McGill, who's a head case to begin with, are going to be competing for the final 2 spots. You looked at that rotation coming in and you said, all right, got confidence in Senga if he's healthy. Really confident in Minaya after the year he had last year as your ace. Yes, you lost Severino, but Peterson stepped up last year. You're going to be experimenting with Clay Holmes going from the bullpen to being a starter for the first time in 7 years. Montas, a guy that, yeah, he's questionable with his injury history, but has been a relatively competent starting pitcher when he's out there. And now you lose him and you go to 2 real question marks. If you're the Mets, you've already spent big money this offseason with this rotation, this team in general, in signing Soto, bringing back Pete, adding to this rotation with the contracts of Montas and with Holmes. Why not go out there and spend a little bit more and go out and get your old buddy Jose Quintana? Because then, if you get Montas back, even if Holmes struggles initially out of the rotation, you could use him out of the bullpen. You could add some depth to the bullpen there. He could be amongst your bridge to get you to Edwin Diaz. This is under the old terms of former Yankee manager Joe Girardi, not what you want to hear. And speaking of the Yankees, we're less than 48 hours into position players arriving, and already Giancarlo Stanton's injured, and it's something he's been dealing with since last year. I don't know, why didn't you send him to doctors? Why didn't you send him to someone to check it out and make sure that Giancarlo Stanton was going to be ready to go at the start of this year and wasn't going to have something lingering from last year? Now I got to hear about this tendonitis in both elbows. As much as I love Giancarlo Stanton, what he does in the postseason, as much as I respect his clutch ability for this Yankees, and as much as I like him as a person, he is an unreliable player. He's the least reliable $30 million player that I've probably ever seen. And a lot of this, I blame on the Yankees for making him a DH in the first year of his career here with the Yankees. Because when he was with the Miami Marlins, he was a competent outfielder. Now, maybe he wasn't the level of Aaron Judge defensively. He was at least more competent than you saw from Juan Soto last year playing right field. He was a guy that you could put out there and weren't worried that he would pull a muscle or make miscues in the field. But ever since they converted him to DH, he's been an injury waiting to happen. You look, the last 5 years, in a total of 708 possible games he could have played in, he's missed 266 of those games due to injuries. And he's injured almost every part of the body in that time frame. This was not some fat piece of crap like David Ortiz that you had to worry about him being sluggish on the baselines or worried that you had to protect him. When you have a big muscular guy like this, you can't have him sitting around for 3 innings and then expect him to go at the drop of a dime running the bases and think nothing wrong was going to happen. But no, you were too obsessed with having to placate to Brett Gardner, and Aaron Hicks had to play them all the time, even though those 2 guys were backup level platoon kind of players. So the Yankees, they've reaped what they sow here with Giancarlo Stanton, and I don't want to hear about luxury tax with them. I don't want to hear, in a year coming off of losing to the Dodgers in the World Series, that's not considered acceptable by this fan base. Just saying you'll lose the World Series and, you know what, we'll give it the old college try and throw it back out there next year. No, you need to make more of an effort to get over the finish line. A finish line you haven't done now in almost 16 years. So to hell with the luxury tax, hell with these aprons and the Cohen tax in the CBA. If there's the chance to go out there and get one of these options that's still out there on free agency, whether it's the likes of a JD Martinez or a Justin Turner, someone along those lines to be your DH at the minimum until Giancarlo Stanton's ready. And it by all means doesn't sound like he's going to be ready for the start of the season. Go do that and worry about how you fit in the roster later on. I don't want to hear about how much money that Hal now has to spend on it. Just go get a competent bat. You can't just say it's going to be Aaron Judge and a bunch of trades that we made and some young kids surrounding him. You need some competency because there's a lot of anger with this franchise. You didn't bring back Soto. He took the money and went to the Mets. And you lost to the Dodgers in the World Series. And they've been doing nothing. Although it's been the likes of Joe Kelly and Kike Hernandez, guys that don't matter in the grand scheme of things. They've been doing nothing but running you down on podcasts all offseason and making you guys seem like total jokes. It's time to get back to being the Yankees and not just celebrating being runners up. And that, my friends, was Keeping It Sports with M3 from Monday, February 17th, 2025. Everyone, please have a great night. Have a fun, safe, happy, healthy week. You get one life, people, so you might as well try to live it up. And I'll talk to you guys again, same time next week. Until then, peace.
We have to go. Good night, everybody.
I have had enough of you!
Thank you for all the fun. Thank you. Hey, shut up, will ya?
I don't want to see you, I don't want to hear you, I don't want to smell you. Now leave.
I'll be back.